Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast interview. On today's show, I have a special guest. He's the CEO and founder of Automotive Ventures and the author of a breakthrough book, The Future of Automotive Retail. Steve, welcome to the show.
Brian, thanks for having me. It's always great to catch up.
You know, Steve, you've worked in a number of very large automotive companies at the executive level. And a few years back, you decided to create Automotive Ventures, which I consider a breakout business for dealers who are not familiar with Automotive Ventures. Can you give us a little overview on what is the vision for the company and why did you decide to get it started?
Yeah, it's a great question. As I reflect back, Brian, you and I have known each other for a long time now. And, I had various corporate roles where, I was overseeing strategy and acquisitions, and became clear to me that no one was doing a great job on behalf of the dealers to help folks understand or frame up all of the various transactions that were occurring in the industry, right? So every year we see these really big exits with Cox or Reynolds or CDK acquiring companies. But I thought, interesting. What if I start to sort of document the investments that were taking place, who was buying what and why? So, when I left my last corporate role back right at the beginning of COVID, I said, let me publish a monthly newsletter and sort of track some of these things. And almost immediately, started to have interest from two constituents. One being, early stage entrepreneurs who were looking to raise money and some guidance, and because they started to see value in the content that we were producing. And then on the flip side, as you can imagine, the investors themselves kind of saying, okay, this is great. You're providing a framework and you've got access to these early stage companies and we want access to them. So that quickly led us to starting to explore, well, what we're going to do with all of this, right? I have a passion for continuing to publish for the benefit of the industry and keeping my fingers on the pulse of everything. But very quickly, we started to explore how might we help the investors connect with the early stage entrepreneurs, which has then led us down the path of ultimately become a venture capital firm. So we're onto our second fund now, and we've made 15 investments out of the first fund. And I got to say, I would encourage anyone who has an inclination to eventually pursue this path. For me, I find it very fulfilling. My days are filled with some combination of fundraising and spending time with entrepreneurs. And I just love, both, frankly, getting inside the heads of the investors and what motivates them. But also equally important is, getting out there and understanding what makes the entrepreneur tick, vetting companies, working with them once we do invest to make sure that they can accelerate growth, et cetera. And it's, I find it busy, but very fulfilling.
Well, it really fills a really interesting need because a lot of these deals, Steve, were kind of like under the covers, behind the scenes. There was no clear path. Some of the VCs, maybe a small entrepreneur would say, oh, this company led a $500 million buyout. They're not going to be interested in, my little idea or my company that I started with $100,000. So I love the fact that there is now an on-ramp for entrepreneurs to bounce their ideas or show the framework that they believe in. So in a sense, it's like the Shark Tank for automotive retail.
Yeah, I think I like the way that you positioned it. I think that I get many, as you can imagine, I get reached out to by a number of entrepreneurs. We see probably 60 companies a month now that reach out from countries all over the world, mostly in the US, but countries all over the world. Some of the ideas aren't very good, and need more work, but many, are very clever, hardworking entrepreneurs who, spending time with someone like you, Brian, or someone like me who's been around the industry so long can help them understand the ins and outs of navigating. If you want to get through and get OEM endorsements, for example, there are paths to go through, and some are fraught, with pitfalls. And just having a thought partner like us can help an early stage entrepreneur who has perhaps like a great team and a great idea to really drive adoption more quickly than they would by fumbling around and having to start from scratch and make those decisions with blinders on.
Well, I would encourage any entrepreneur who's thinking about taking their product public and seek funding to reach out to Steve and go to Automotive Ventures website. Steve, I want to flip the script now and talk about your new book. Having written many books specific to automotive, we know that we're not selling hundreds of thousands of copies, but we are passionate about investing in the future of automotive retail. And so writing a book is not easy. It comes with a willingness to be vulnerable, to open yourself up for criticism, open yourselves up for critique in your thought processes or, well, decisions that you've made on what to recommend or how to predict the future. So what made you buckle down, take all the products that you've been seeing, all the research you've done, and say, it's time to put pen to paper?
Well, Brian, I mean, I'll give you kudos here, right? Because you were one of the primary inspirations for this. I've seen just how prolific you've been, and I don't know how you find the time to publish. I think you've published what, not 9 books now?
Yes.
But you know, people like you, like Dale Pollock, who ironically, you know, is legally blind, but still, you know, publishes books, you know, like clockwork. Very insightful books, and even, you know, guys like Grant Cardone, who now have strayed away from automotive specifically. But so I've had good case studies, including yourself. So thank you for that. And you know, I think that the way I kind of look at it is, I feel empathy for the car dealer, right? They are effectively locked into these 30-day cycles where everything has been driven through profitability and sales and market share on a 30-day cycle, and you get one 30-day cycle done, and then you got to start it anew, right? And as a result of that, I think what we've created is a little bit of a dysfunctional cycle where dealers don't have the luxury of looking out on the horizon to see what are the potential disruptive forces that are brewing, and which ones should I be paying attention to. And you know, I think that even if you look at the media, with all due respect, the media, everything that, you know, is bite-sized, because recognizing who the audience is and their attention span, there really hasn't been anyone who has looked and said, okay, well, how might these things play out in the next 5 or 10 years? And then most importantly, out of all the different trends that are out there, which ones should you know, any of us who are participating in this automotive ecosystem be paying attention to? So that was really the inspiration one from folks like you who have done it before, make it easier. Always nice to be able to walk down the path that someone's already walked down and established. But then my sense was the need was for someone to put a stake in the ground. And as you said, be a little vulnerable, but, you know, synthesize all of these trends into one book and start to provide a little bit of perspective around which of the trends, most importantly, should the industry be paying attention to and why?
You know, and before we get into the themes of the book, I just had a kind of a crazy thought. You know, obviously people read the book, they send you a message, text. Is there one feedback message you received from a dealer that made you chuckle, made you feel good, made you scratch your head? Because of course, I've gotten a number of questions as I've written books, but this is such a breakthrough to have kind of everything future looking in one place. Anything that you remember off the top of your head that stands out as feedback from someone who read the book?
Yeah. So great question. So I'm sure you have plenty of stories as well about your books. I would say that I'm always flattered, as I'm sure you are, when someone reads the book, takes the time to read the book, and then, you know, orders another 15 copies because they want to hand it out to people who are in their like sphere of influence. And I think that's happened on both sides. I think when I realized, I mean, you know, the book's only been out for a couple of months here, but when I realized I'd threaded the needle correctly was this. So, you know, I've had a few of the what I would call like business brokers, the buy sell brokers who represent mostly the sell side, but sometimes the buy side for physical dealerships. When they've read the book, and then I get the comment, this is a great call to sell stores. I'm going to buy another 15 or 20 books and give them to the owners that I represent. And, a call to sell stores right now because the world's changing so quickly. It's the best time to sell. And then balance that with, an owner who orders an additional 15 books for their GMs to say, thank you for getting all of these trends in one spot and providing a fair and balanced view. We feel more optimistic than ever about the future. And the long term. So I said, okay, well, when I'm getting those in equal measure, I'm like, I think I've accomplished what I wanted to do because I to your point, I didn't want to be the person, and I'm not the person who says the sky's falling, because what we know is like one, the dealer model has been so defensible because dealers are the consummate entrepreneurs out there, and they'll always find a way to reallocate resources around to drive profitability through their stores. So, I mean, it's not like we're looking at yet again the death of the dealer that has been prophesized many times, right? Many times.
Yes, it has.
But at the same time, I mean, shame on the dealer who isn't observing these trends and saying, man, my business is going to change pretty dramatically. And I had best stay abreast of these trends and have a plan, because otherwise you could get run over. And so anyway, maybe a long-winded way of just sort of saying, I've gotten great feedback and compliments from both sides of the continuum. Those that are motivated by trying to convince dealers to sell their stores and get out now, and those that are like, no, retrenching for the long term and see this as a key sort of playbook that they can execute against.
Well, you know what, that's encouraging, because the truth is some dealers have given up, staying abreast of things. I mean, it wasn't just a few months ago, a friend of mine bought a dealership, and this dealership was in Tennessee, and they weren't using a CRM.
Ooh, wow.
Like, hold on, 2022, they weren't using a CRM. Like, what? They were just using like Gmail and Outlook. And I'm like, really? Like, wow. Yeah, they should have definitely got out, right? So, and then I see groups like the Morgan Auto Group here in Florida, where I live, that are just on a amazing acquisition spree. Lithia's been on an acquisition spree, Pohanka and others, and they get it, right? And I think that this book is perfectly suited to stir the pot on both ends. So let's talk about what's in the book so we can encourage folks to order a copy on Amazon today. How would you break out the themes of the book?
Yeah, so it's the stuff that we're seeing weekly, if not daily, in the news cycle, right? So spend a lot of time and kick off the book around the consumer experience, which I know is near and dear to your heart, and you've effectively built conferences around this topic. But what's going on with the consumer and what their expectations are, and trying to separate signal to noise a little bit around, should we suspect that at some point in the future that transactions are going to be 100% online? Probably no. But is there going to be a growing percentage of consumers that are going to be demanding, potentially driveway delivery, and if not that, many facets of the car deal to be negotiated online, and out of the comfort of their home? Yes. And what are the implications of those things? And then talking about electrification, and just very prudently, what might penetration of electrification be in the U.S., given we've got a tale of two cities here. We've got dense urban areas, and then we've got rural areas, and we're never going to get to 100% electrification unless we solve some of the issues with range and charging infrastructure and charging speed. More relevantly for dealers is like this agency model, and we're hearing more and more of that in the news cycle. And what the OEMs have learned during COVID is really around how artificially limiting supply means that all the cars sell at or above MSRP, which makes the OEMs more profitable and makes the dealers more profitable. And the OEMs get a double whammy because they can really ratchet down the incentive spending And all of that flows through to their bottom line. So of course the OEMs are sitting here and saying, what have we learned from this experiment we've had for the last 2.5 years? And then coupled with that, now that Tesla does seem to have escape velocity, and they're profitable, what can we learn from that direct sale model? We're seeing evidence of that overseas with some of the very same OEMs, the legacy OEMs, pushing much quicker to what's considered an agency model in Europe and down in Australia, and some of the pushback that the dealers are having as a result of that. So we're able to kind of see that case study roll out. And then the last thing I'll say is, because there are other themes in here, but for a dealer to sit here and say, okay, so what these cars are going to be all connected, which is going to mean that I have the unique opportunity to have a kind of a real-time relationship with the driver of the car and be able to communicate with them. But so does the OEM. And
That's
pushing,
right.
the OEMs are talking about this quote unquote software-defined vehicle, taking a page of the Tesla playbook and saying, look, we're going to own the software system and be able to push real-time updates to the consumer, which has two implications, really. One, a lot of the previous recall work and warranty work is now going to be able to be done remotely in your driveway while your car is sitting overnight hooked up to your Wi-Fi in your home. And you're going to go into your car in the morning and it's going to say, we've updated your operating system and we've corrected these 3 glitches. And up until now, those cars have had to go into dealers, and dealers are going to see the consumer less frequently, not only because EVs have longer service intervals, but because with software pushes, a lot of the work that would have had to be done at the dealership is going to be able to be done at the consumer's home. And associated with that is just the subscription services. And we've seen news recently around things like BMW allowing a consumer on a monthly basis to unlock rear heated seats. We've heard from Porsche that the next generation of Porsche, you'll be able to pay a premium per month any month you want to unlock another 50 horsepower. I was at an Audi store not too long ago where they had just gotten notification, the owner had just gotten notification that the future generation of these e-tron vehicles, when the consumer runs out of charge at the side of the road, they'll no longer have to call AAA to pick up the car. They'll be able to go onto their Audi app and for a one-time charge of $100, unlock 50 miles of range. And it's like, oh, interesting. So there's still capacity left in these batteries. You can't run them down to zero all the time, but you won't harm the battery if you run it down occasionally. And my response to that owner was, okay, that's great. So you sold the consumer a car, and then 6 months from now they run out of juice on the side of the road, and they get on their Audi app and they pay $100 to unlock 50 miles of range. Who gets that revenue?
Right.
And
I would say I have an idea who's getting it.
Right. Well, and he looked at me blankly, and I said, "Yeah, exactly. This is the challenge: is the fact that the Detroit OEMs, or historically Detroit OEMs, you have Ford, GM, and Stellantis, have all said that they're going to generate more than $20 billion in incremental revenue per year based on allowing consumers to unlock features and functionality on their car and pay via credit card on a monthly basis. So we're entering a new era of like the software-defined vehicle, but to be determined, how much of that $20 billion will be shared between the dealer and the OEM. And I'm certain, as you kind of just like laughed at, like some OEMs will be generous, and some OEMs probably won't be as generous. And the dealers are going to have to stay abreast of this through their dealer councils, et cetera, because a lot of those negotiations are going to have very long-term impacts.
For sure. And I'm also thinking that in that model, maybe the production then of vehicles is a little bit more streamlined. Instead of saying, hey, this car needs heated seats, so we need to put in XYZ parts, maybe it's, hey, we're going to build these cars more in a cookie cutter way and let the software turn features on and off. That gives us faster, production time, less individual, custom builds. Very interesting as we look forward to the future. And I will tell you, I would be a little ticked off if I had to pay $100 to let my own battery of the car that I owned just push. So I'll just say that my old school mentality is, hey, I bought the car. I understand not running it down, but it's still my car and battery. Give me a get out of jail free pass. Well, it's my car,
Right.
but that's old school thinking. Steve, one of the interesting outcomes of this book was really a companion piece, which you're calling the Automotive Ventures Retail Risk Assessment. It's amazing how much traction that has been getting, and so I'm very much interested in talking about that because I'm finishing up my master's degree, and there's an interesting book that I'm reading, and there's a website, trendhunter.com, and this author has just been famous on identifying trends and mega trends, and you're doing this specific for automotive. And so for the dealers who are listening today, tell us about the retail risk assessment. How is it being utilized today in automotive retail?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. So I had a chance to record the audio version of the book. So if you want, you can get that. Like it's you have to listen to my voice for 6.5 hours. So be warned in advance. But through that process, you have a lot of time to think about the content that you've written because you're committing that much time to reading it. And I was like, I think that if a dealer reads the book, and maybe I'm foreshadowing here, right? But if a dealer reads the book, they might get to the very end and not feel quite satisfied. Because while I think I've done a reasonable job of piecing together all of these trends in the industry and bringing them all into one place, they might say, okay, but now what? What do I do about that? So, as I did that and I started to reflect on, I think there's something else I need to do here, which was get all of those 16 trends into one document, which is this retail risk assessment, but then, try to map out or plot out each of those 16 trends on two axes, right? Like a little 2x2, like a typical consultant would do, which is the probability of any of these trends hitting in the next 5 years. And then if they do hit, the magnitude of the impact. So if you map those two things together, obviously, if something has a very low probability of hitting and a very low impact, even if it does hit, you can ignore it, right? Just don't spend any mental cycles on it, et cetera. It's the things that are in the upper right-hand corner, which are the things that are very likely to happen and then have a huge impact potentially on the dealership model, which is the things that people should be paying attention to. So really a framework to be able to sift through these 16 trends. And the nice thing is we'll be able to track them over time, right? So we may very well find, oh, wow, like I said earlier, over-the-air updates, it seems like adoption is accelerating. Or if the manufacturers do get more momentum around the agency model and they start contesting state franchise laws, we can map that and we can trend these things over time. So it was really I think the way you characterize it is great, and thank you, as a companion piece to the book that hopefully is very complimentary and trying to make sense of the trends that dealers should be paying attention to. And then I think that I've only yet, I can't really answer the second part of your question, which is how is the industry using this? I can tell you it's creating a lot of interesting dialogue with owners and their GMs. And I'm starting to facilitate some of these sessions where we sit down and we have the GMs think through sort of these things. Because I guess the challenges and what I've heard anecdotally so far from GMs is, thank you, because we hear all of these things in the news cycle, but the average GM, again, going back to the dysfunctional 30-day cycles that all of the industry's in, doesn't have the perspective to start to calibrate around which of these trends should I be paying attention to, and what might the impacts be to me specifically as I'm operating a store. And I think to me, if I can provide that to the industry and help them sort through which of these to be paying attention to and what the impacts might be, I think it seems like it needs to be done for the sake of the industry. And I hope to continue to publish this thing and get feedback and make it better.
Man, I love that. And, I do want to encourage the dealers, dealer group leaders, and of course, the OEM listeners that the tools to, in a sense, ingest and observe innovation are not naturally developed in school. So,
Right.
by putting all of these trends into one book, the next question is, as Steve brought up, is how are we going to deal with them and the trends that are happening in automotive retail also mirror trends outside of automotive. So as a companion, I would encourage listeners to go to trendhunter.com and download the free 2023 trend report. And here's what you're going to find out. The dealers and dealer groups that want to stay relevant in the future need to be following what Steve's writing about and discussing on his regular publications and newsletters. But we also have to be better at looking outside of automotive, seeing the bigger macro picture of what's happening with consumer trends, consumer desire, and the website trendhunter.com was an eye-opener. It's part of the class that I'm taking now on dealing with technology and innovation for my master's degree. Steve, as you look forward to the Modern Retailing Conference in Palm Beach, November 13th, 14th, and 15th, dealers are going to be coming up to you. They're going to be asking you your opinion. If you wanted dealers to do a little homework between now and November, in addition to reading the book, what questions would you ask them to think about? How would you challenge them to prepare for the future? Because what I've always found is people are quick to complain, but very slow to reflect, very slow to look at what they're doing. What would you challenge dealers who might be coming to the Modern Retail Conference, may want to sit down with you? How do you make that time productive? What would you challenge them to think about?
Yeah, so a couple of things. If you're an Amazon customer, I think you get Audible for free, and so the audio version of the book's available on Amazon, and consume whichever parts of it you want. I think if you want a cheat sheet, you can simply go to Automotive Ventures and download the Automotive Ventures Retail Risk Assessment, as we've talked about, and it's just 2 pages, and just consume that. I mean, if you want to just on the plane, just look that over. I would challenge dealers in general to this, right? So interestingly enough, I talked to an owner recently, and they're saying, "Hey, I'd really like you to come speak to my general managers and facilitate this kind of conversation that we just talked about." But they said, "But I don't want my GMs to worry." And I was like, "Okay, I understand. Explain that to me." And it's like, with the news cycle, et cetera, like I really want them to be focused on delivering results and, within their swim lane, whatever, analogy you want to use. But I was like, that's interesting. I said, but do you think that they're not reading articles and like wondering about these things and trying to piece them together? And so I would just like, I can appreciate, keeping, your employees focused and not distracting them. Right. We don't want to, overwhelm employees or have them feel anxiety, et cetera. But I think don't discount the fact that your employees are, tuning into the industry publications. They're reading these articles. And maybe I'm partially to blame here, probably reading my monthly Intel report and my commentary on the industry. But, I think that's the fine line we need to walk here. And I don't know that I have an answer for that, but I think, just my encouragement would be don't try to keep your employees in the dark, because they can get onto any website and read these articles. But I think also we have to take a fair and balanced view. And, Brian, I said this, I think, at the beginning of this segment was, the dealer business model has been very resilient. And over the years, the dealers have reallocated resources and people, from focusing on the front end gross to F&I to sales and service, and been very successful, effectively running, 7 different operations under one rooftop. And, I think that, we shouldn't be fearful of the future. there's probably a quote in here from some famous person, but we shouldn't be fearful of the future, but shame on us if we just keep like an ostrich, keep our head tucked under the sand and hope all of these problems go away, because they're not going away. They are not going
Right.
away.
And Steve, one last thing. We opened up today's interview talking about automotive ventures, and we encouraged entrepreneurs to reach out to you to bounce their vision, their ideas. What about your dealer fund? What if people want to invest in these next gen companies? Where do they go for that information? And is there a minimum investment so we don't have people calling you who want to invest $100?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the genesis of the dealer fund was really the evolution of our company, which is we're hearing more and more that dealers have a keen interest in investing in some of these early stage companies, that automotive technology companies that they use. So we are currently raising a fund, as Brian said, to work with dealerships to invest in this fund, and then we'll spend time with them to understand what their biggest needs are and build an investment thesis around that to go hunting for companies that will not only benefit them financially when the companies ultimately exit, but maybe more importantly, that they can use day to day in their operations and benefit from. So you can find out more on automotiveventures.com. There's a section on there for the dealer fund. And to Brian's point, the minimum is $500,000 in terms of a commitment. But as with any venture capital fund, we only call the capital of that minimum 500,000 as needed. So really the financial commitment is in over a 4 to 5 year period. So it isn't all at once. So we think that dealers prudently should be looking at diversifying into something that they really understand and can benefit from. And so far it's been really great. We've been able to spend time with our investors. We're about halfway raised on the fund right now. Our target is to get to a $50 million fund, 50 total. And it's really great when you can abstract an owner away from the day-to-day, talk about the future, talk about these frameworks, and then have them start to brainstorm around what solutions still need to get built in this industry. Whether it's taking out costs from the operations, finding ways to sell more F&I products or sell more service, fill up service capacity in the lanes, et cetera, in their bays. It's really been very exciting. So I really cherish those conversations I get to have as a result of this fund.
Well, I love that because, I've met so many really sharp entrepreneurs and, look, they know this business inside and out, and they are the best people to have in your investment committee, challenging different thesis and, ideas that are brought forth because they're in the field every day executing automotive retail. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your vision. Let me recap in this way. As an author, I know that when we write books for the automotive industry, we're not going to sell a lot of copies because a lot of people don't want to read. But I know people in automotive retail spend a lot of time in the car. And so I want to encourage you to use Audible through your Amazon subscription and download a copy of The Future of Automotive Retail from Steve Greenfield and listen to it. Challenge your team to listen to it, and then use some frameworks that are provided either in Steve's book or, as I mentioned, Trend Hunter, to talk about how your dealership is going to evolve and meet these rising challenges. They're not going away. And the strong will always survive because the dealership model is absolutely resilient and such a key piece of local communities' infrastructure. If you love today's conversation, you're going to love Steve on the main stage at the Modern Retail Conference. Rusty West, myself, and Steve are going to talk about the future of automotive retail and what's going on in the marketplace. Another great reason to come to the Modern Retailing Conference, but more important, this is a conference about education on sales process, technology, marketing, measurement, HR. Go to modernretailingconference.com. You will look at the agenda and come away with one thing. This is an education-focused conference. The who's who in automotive retail, technology, and education will be present, and it's in the beautiful O Hotel and Resort in Palm Beach, Florida. It's a beautiful time to be in Palm Beach in November. The weather is perfect every single day. So make sure you get your tickets, book your hotel. The event sells out every year. And you'll also have the benefit of spending some time with Steve when we're not in session. If this is the first time you're listening to one of my podcasts, you should know that I interview industry disruptors, leaders, and visionaries on a regular basis. And there are dozens of interviews that you can listen to when you're in the car or when you have some free time on the Apple Podcast channel, Google Play, or you can go to brianpash.libsyn, that's LIBSYN.com, to see all of the episodes. This is a series of the speakers and educators that will be at Modern Retailing Conference. So check out what we've been publishing in September and October. And I hope to see you soon in November at the Modern Retailing Conference, November 13th, 14th, and 15th. Steve, thanks so much for being on the show. I'm so happy that the automotive industry is embracing your book.
Well, Brian, as always, thanks for being generous with your time, and thank you for everything you do for the industry.
Well, thank you. And for everyone who's listening, thank you for taking time to educate yourselves and stay abreast of the latest in automotive retail. I'll catch you next time on another podcast interview.